A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another live session of GETI Talks. My name is Shilpi. I'm the Relationship Manager with the Global Education and Training Institute. I know you have seen this young man before also. He was a EdNote speaker, in our Ed Leadership Conference. And apart from that, you also know him as a famous archaeologist, the youngest one in India at the age of 21. He's also a philosopher. So he's the best person to talk today on a very important topic, which is rivers, which have been a part of our culture. Not only they have been an essential part of our lives, but they have been an integral part of our culture. And today being the World Day of Action on Rivers, here is Arsh Ali, who's going to talk about it. So, Arsh, welcome to our show. Thank you once again for joining in the Disruptive Education Movement. So, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, and I thank the organizers of Getty Foundation for this wonderful program, as well as to Ms. Shilpi for being the awesome anchor all the time. And as ma'am has said, that today is an international day for the rivers because rivers are an integral part of our lives. They are something that sustain us. They are something that make our civilization possible, our economy possible, our culture possible. So, in that way, even as this particular suk says from the Shastras, that is Nadiyam Mata Mahyam, that the rivers are my mothers. So, this is a wonderful example of how the Indian tradition has laid emphasis on the importance of rivers. They have to be important for the all over pedagogic development of a country, the development of the people, as well as for the upliftment of the environmental issues that are taking place these days. So, obviously, rivers have a very important role to play, not just in all these spheres, but also in education. Because we know that in the ancient Indian tradition, most of the gurukuls or the ashrams were situated along the river banks. Whether we talk about the Bharadwaj ashram in Prayagraj, from where I'm speaking right now, or we talk about many such ashrams, they were absolutely located on the banks of rivers, and therefore they were nodes of education and training and teaching in the ancient times. So, of course, rivers have a role to play even in that sphere. And we need to explore and find out how exactly the rivers have this connect with education, with development, with entrepreneurship, as well as with the economy or the polity that we talk about. And we know that many of the times when the civilizations appeared in the world historical view, when we talk about Egypt or when we talk about China or we talk about the Indus Valley civilization in Pakistan and India today, or we talk about the Mesopotamian civilization in Iraq, all these civilizations emerged on the banks of river itself. If we talk about Egypt, it was on the banks of the river Nile that the civilization emerged. If we talk about the Mesopotamian civilization, it was on the banks of the Tigris and the Euphrates that the civilization had evolved. And if we talk about the Indus Valley civilization, the name itself points to the fact that the Indus was the central zonal area of the entire civilization. Very recently, archaeologists have even discovered traces of another river that was an important part of the river channel system of the Indus civilization, and we call it as the Saraswati River. Today, it is known as the Ghagar Hakra River, which flowed all the way from Himachal Pradesh via Haryana and Rajasthan to the Indus. So, it was another network of rivers that played an important role in the development of the IVC or the Indus Valley civilization. And sometimes, even today, many of the scholars are now saying that it must not be called as the Indus Valley civilization, rather, it must be called as the Indus Saraswati civilization. So, these are also some claims based on the latest researches that we have. And when we talk about the Chinese civilization, there also the Huanghe and the Yellow Rivers played an important role in the development of the civilization. So, of course, rivers have a very, very important role to play. And even for the environment, river pollution is taking place these days due to the increase in the pollution. So also we need to take care of the controlling of the pollution that is taking place in the rivers such as the Ganges in India and the Yamuna, who are getting polluted day by day. And these were the centers of culture, these were the centers of civilization in our times, as well as in the past. So we need to take care of the fact that the rivers have to be personified as mothers of sustainable development. They are our mothers. They are the mothers of a country. And therefore, we need to respect them. We need to take care of them. We need to conserve them, as well as we need to respect them as someone would do for a mother. So that I think is the whole brief of our talk that is there for the next 55 minutes. And I hope that our audience would be able to have a glimpse of the insights into the importance of rivers.
Right. So, is there anything else you want to add to it before I begin the questions?
Well, I must say that since rivers also played an important part in the educating process of ancient India, because as I said, most of the ashrams were situated along the rivers. Therefore, rivers also played a part in the educational and the intellectual developments of India. So, therefore, we need to also see rivers not just a means of resource or something that has to be conserved, but rather it is something of a cultural importance. It also has some heritage status, it also has some cultural status, whether we talk about the Ganga, or we talk about the Yamuna, or we talk about the Kaveri River in the south. All these rivers have their own cultural and economic significance, and also how they play a role in the intellectual development of the country or the areas in which they flow.
Well, so,
So,
like, you know, whereas all the civilization, as you mentioned, we have read in history, whether it's in Egypt or India, they have been around the river, because water was needed in all the forms. Today, how many rivers, like you are into history for a very long time. So, have you seen that rivers have vanished from the face of the earth? You know, how many of them have you been able to see that they have been, because of the carelessness of the human race, have they vanished, entirely from the face of the earth, or have been neglected?
well, if we talk about Egypt, the Nile has still not been neglected. The Nile is the gift of, it's the only river that flows in Egypt. Because Egypt is desert, it's a total desert country. So the Nile is still considered to be sacred and important among the Egyptians. And that's why we see that when Ethiopia wanted to build a dam on the Nile, the upper course of the Nile, Egypt was one of the first countries to have objected to the construction of the dam because they knew that if the regulation of the river Nile would happen, the flow rate of the Nile would decrease, and therefore the annual production of Egypt would also decrease. So they already know the importance of the river Nile if we talk about Egypt. When we talk about Mesopotamia, the Tigris and the Euphrates again have the same significance as they had in the ancient times. Because even that area is very arid, it is dry, and therefore, even in that part of the world, these two rivers play a very important role for the overall development of countries like Iraq, or even sometimes in the upper course of the rivers when we talk about places like Turkey, from where the rivers also pass through. And when we talk about India, we already know that one of the two important rivers of the Indus Valley civilization, that is the Ghaggar Hakra or the Saraswati River, as it is called in the Rig Veda, it has already vanished. So it is only during the rainy season when seasonally it flows. But for the rest of the year, it is not perennial. It remains dry as the Nala, right? But the Indus still remains in the same position. And even due to the fact that the Ghaggar Hakra dried up, some historians have already claimed that the Indus Valley civilization perhaps ended due to the desertification that happened in the region around the Saraswati River. When that river dried up, obviously the cities that were along its banks, they were abandoned and people moved to new places. So it shows us that absolutely one of the most ancient, most civilizations, the Indus Valley civilization, had already been in decline due to natural causes, particularly the desertification of a river valley. In China, the Huanghe River and the Yellow River, they still flow. Sometimes they get over flooded, very much like the Brahmaputra River in Assam. You see the news very often that floods are there in Assam and the Brahmaputra has overflowed. So many a times in the same way, the rivers in the Chinese area, that is the Huanghe or the Yellow River, they also get over flooded. Now they are under control, but they are also the lifeline of China. So again, rivers have an important role to play in the overall development of the countries or the country where they flow. When we talk about the Ganges, it is considered to be the most sacred river in the entire world. People worship the Ganges as a mother. See in Varanasi the Ganga Aarti that takes place every day. Yesterday, our honorable president he was actually participating in the
Yeah.
Ganga Aarti with the Honorable Chief Minister of
Yes.
Uttar Pradesh. So you see how exactly rivers are so much interconnected with our lives. And even most of the important cities like Lucknow is situated on the banks of the Gomti. Allahabad, Varanasi, all these rivers are situated on the banks of the Ganges. Mathura, Agra, they are situated on the banks of the Yamuna. So obviously, all these cities, the important ones, are absolutely either located on the banks of the rivers or on the sea coast. So obviously, they play a role in transportation, they play a role in resources and agriculture. But apart from that, they also have lots of intellectual and cultural achievements as well that took place around these river systems.
Yeah, I mean, usually what you call some kind of cultural gatherings and all used to take place near the rivers. And, for especially um, gurus and everybody used to go to these rivers early in the morning because it was supposed to be, that the Brahma Muhurat, what we call, was supposed to be the most auspicious time to take a bath and meditate on the rivers, the ghats of the river. So today in modern life, if we look upon rivers, civilizations are happening everywhere. I mean, not civilizations, people are already living. I mean, it's not a civilization anymore. So, the pollution that is created when people celebrate festivals near the river, or when they are there even for religious purposes. So, how do you think that affects the pollution? And that actually, in the name of religion or in the name of, rituals, not religion per se, but rituals, are we actually polluting and not respecting the rivers?
Absolutely. Because in the ancient times, when we see the Puranas, from where the entire idea of making idols and then submerging them in the rivers, what we call Visarjan, happens,
Yes.
in the Puranas, it is said that the statue has to be made of mud. So, of course, it helped in the addition of fertility of the river itself. Because when you make statues of gods for the temporary worship before submerging them in the rivers, you will choose the best of the soil because the soil has to be of good quality. So after the worship, what happens is that when you submerge that statue, and lakhs of people will do in the same way, it will add to the overall fertility of the mud that the river provides to the land, the silt as we say. So it added actually to the river itself. The river was not polluted, rather it was added up in terms of the fertility of the soil, the silt that it carried, as well as to the overall production that happened around the river valleys. But these days we see that people are making statues of plaster of Paris or artificial plasters or
Yeah.
sometimes even plastic or synthetics. So that of course is something that we don't find even in the religious text per se, if we talk even of the rituals, not of the religion itself. So even the rituals are not followed in the right way. If they are to be followed in the right way, there would be no pollution because at that time there were no plaster of Paris, there were no synthetic statues, So all the Puranas, whether we talk about the rituals that are followed or the statues that were made, they were all of mud or biodegradable materials like straw. So of course there was no question of pollution in those days. So it is absolutely our own mistake, our own addition, our own partial understanding of the rituals that these pollution problems are taking place these days in rivers. And we say that for most of the time, the rivers were actually personified as mothers. So there
Hmm.
was no question of polluting the rivers. Because at that time, in the ancient times, people were not too much materialistic. They led a very simple life, right? So they were not like being very much attached to material identity or taking place or having possessing things which were highly materialistic or highly illusionary. They rather opted for things that were simple, that were easy to use, and that they were renewable in nature. But today we see that people are opting for things that are polluting, that are non biodegradable, non renewable, as well as too much of the attractiveness that is there with those objects. It is not per se for your own happiness, but what we see today is that people are doing things to show off to others. So that is the basic idea behind the deeds of what we see today in amongst the people. That the idea of action is not for the benefit of everyone. The idea of action today for most of the people is for the benefit of oneself. So that leads to selfishness, and selfishness leads to sorrow. It leads to distress. And that is why we see that today there is an increase in the number of cases of depression and suicide, because the increase in that tendency is due to the increase of ego. Aham Brahmasmi, I am the only one, I am everything. So that has to be reduced by a proper understanding of the soul. It has to be reduced by a proper understanding of Prakriti and Purush, the two entities, and
Yeah.
their relationship with one another. Prakriti is as important as Purush, and Purush is also as important as Prakriti. If one has to get disturbed, the other will automatically get disturbed. That has to be understood to the fullest of capacity. That the lesser the ego, the more happy you would be, the more blissful your life will become. And the same also goes to our relationship with the rivers. So the more we pollute the rivers, the more climate change will happen, and therefore the more melting of the ice caps that are situated in the Arctic and the Antarctic region, as well as the glaciers that are there in the mountainous regions, and the more disastrous floods and droughts will happen. And therefore, we are at a loss, not the rivers.
So, Arsh, coming to the point where we talk about younger generation, the youngsters, they are not too much into their culture. They are not too much into, studying their religion or faith or culture or rituals, anything. So, what would you like to tell them? Why is it important for them to know their culture so that, isn't it important that when you know your culture, then you would actually respect the rivers? Otherwise, they'll just be streams for you. They'll just be a part of a little feature of geography for you. It wouldn't, when you want something to be important. And that is the reason why I believe that, our ancient rishis and munis have given importance to certain trees, certain plants, certain rivers, because they knew if we are not going to put them into sacred spaces, human beings will never respect it. So, like the banyan tree, there was people trees, which are good for the earth. So they put into. So how would you encourage these youngsters who are of your age and the ones who are younger to you? Isn't it important for them in order to save nature, they need to also know their culture?
It is absolutely the need of the hour. When we talk about the 21st century, the 21st century is not an age of revolution, it is an age of environmental revolution.
Yeah.
We are at the wake of the most disastrous event that can take place, that is the extinction of the human species as a whole. That already had happened to the dinosaurs, and now we
Mhm.
are at the line. So this is the need of the hour to understand and make others understand about the importance of conservation. The people of the past were very aware about the importance of trees and animals and rivers, and that's why, even in the Indian tradition, they were worshipped as deities. The Rig Veda, or we talk about the Upanishads, or we talk about the Puranas, or we talk about any text, they all revere all these natural entities. When we talk about things like worshipping the people tree or worshipping the banyan tree, they already had some idea about the biological importance, the importance of all these trees in the ecosystem. They knew very well, not exactly very much like what we know about oxygen, but they had the idea of prana in Ayurveda. So they knew that these trees add to the prana of the entire ecosystem, the entire cosmos. And therefore they worship these trees because in the text, in the Vedic text or the Puranic text, you see that the banyan tree or the people tree is being said to be the abode of all the gods and goddesses. It means that the prana or the spirit, the likeness of this entire nature is situated in these trees. So we need to conserve them. People also worship them so that people could not cut them. Because, of course, the tree, the people tree, if we take this example, the wood is not of a good quality. So you can't use that wood for furniture or for any other purpose. So people would try to eradicate those trees from places where they would grow naturally. Therefore, this idea of worshipping those trees and doing the pujas or the rituals around them, they came into existence for the proper preservation and protection or conservation of those trees. So they added it to be a part of the religion so that people could follow it really obediently. The logic goes that side, that it was added as a part of the whole faith of the religious process of ancient India so that people could follow it to the best of their capacity. So, in today's time, we need to look into our text. We need to look into our ancient past in a very scientific way, in a very impartial way. We cannot just say nuts, about anything or everything. We need to have proper evidence, proper scientific or historical evidence for any fact or any other argument that we make. So evidence is important, and when you have the evidence, you have the proper narration, the proper explanation for a phenomenon. Let's say about the understanding the ancient Indians had about the trees or their importance. You can actually have a stronger argument that you can present to the millennials. Because right now we see that the children of today are so much curious, they are so much understanding, they are so much impartial in their thought that if you say nuts before them, they will not agree to. They need proper evidence, they need proper understanding, they need
Yeah.
proper explanation before they'll accept something from your side. So this is a good part from the millennials, from the people, the children of the 21st century, that they believe in something only after if you give the proper praman, the proper evidence before them. So in some way, they have actually followed the Gita. They're actually following what the ancient Indian tradition is all about. That you constantly question about everything and anything possible. You question about yourself. You question about the cosmos. You question about the Atma and the Paramatma. You question about this and that. You question about nature. So this entire questioning thing is actually was a very integral part of our own philosophical and cultural heritage of India. So this is really important for us to understand.
Yeah. And so, talking about this very topic, that action on rivers. So, is it just action of cleaning up the rivers, or is this action, can be exaggerated to something else also? For example, creating reverence for the rivers in today's generation, making them understand that you don't have to preserve the rivers just because they're essential for life, but because they also add to your entire existence as a human being. So would you like to elucidate? You'll be the best person to tell people how it feels when you go and stand next to a river, in a bad mood, or when you are actually jubilant, how river contributes to your actually even psychological built up of as a person?
Well, the best part is that I actually enjoy being along riverbanks because since I'm from Prayagraj, I'm from Allahabad, so it's a place where the three rivers, obviously the two ones, the young Ganga and the Yamuna, they confluence. So at times when I want to think about something or I want to, have some inner reflections about myself, I actually go to the Sangam. I just sit very calmly with some jalebis and some samosas in my hand, and eating them, thinking about something, and seeing the flowing waters of the Ganges. So it happens to me, and I really enjoy it. And being along the banks of a river or a lake or something, I really enjoy that thing. So we see that rivers were a very, very important part of the philosophical insights of the famous personalities, like
Yes.
Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, he composed the Gitanjali, for which he won the Nobel Prize in Literature, on the banks of the Hooghly. So it is also amazing to see that he also had the best of his ideas when he used to see the rivers and the fishermen and their songs and the beautiful ladies coming to fetch water, filling their pots full of water from the rivers, some people doing the puja along the banks. So that actually adds to your creativity. Even we have Amitabh Bachchan from Allahabad. So even he also, I think in one of his interviews said that he also used to enjoy the Ganges and he used to sit for hours along the banks, looking at the Ganges, the people around, and he would also enjoy some snacks. And he would think about himself, how he's doing about what actions he has to perform, the roadmap of the future, so to speak. So the action of rivers is not actually the action what we think as conservation or environmental protection. The action has to be from the heart. The action has to be from our soul. We have to think about rivers as rivers. And the moment we'll do it correctly, we'll learn how to respect it, and the conservation will automatically happen. We just have to relive and rethink about the rivers the same way our ancestors did in the past. We just had this discontinuation of materialistic approach towards the river. Otherwise, it was a continuation. And we just need to recontinue it. Leaving of the idealistic thoughts towards the rivers, rivers are not a resource. They are the sustainable bloodline of our culture. If they go dry, then the entire thing will perish. So there's no way to run about if the rivers come to an end. We need to preserve them and conserve them. And we see that even in the ancient Indian tradition or even in the ancient traditions of other cultures, most of the schools were situated along the banks of the rivers. And
Yes.
the students, they were made to think about ideas or about concepts sitting on the banks of the rivers. You think about that way that a teacher, a guru, is making his students recite some of the Vedic shlokas of Varun, who is the god of waters, along the banks of the river. So you see that the children are sitting, you imagine that the children are sitting on the banks of the rivers, reciting to the fullest of their heart the shlokas for Varun or the shlokas for Ganges along the banks, and the sound of the river is coming into the ears of the students, and they can connect the shlok and the shlok coming from their mouth and the shlok coming from the rivers. And they can match it and they can make an entire new meaning of what they are saying and what the river wants to tell them. So this was the view of rivers. People connected with rivers. In the Rig Veda, there is one instance where we see that sage Vishwamitra, who is one of the Vedic rishis, he wanted to cross two rivers, that is the Satluj and the Beas, which is now in the Punjab region. So, for crossing the rivers, he prayed them, he requested them, called them as sisters. Because we wish to cross the rivers. We wish that when we will cross, your waters cannot rise above our axles of the wheels, of the chariots or the carts that we are in. So he called them as sisters, Sahodari, Sahodarasya Nadiyam. So the sisters, the river sisters. So sisters ko to we have Rakhi, Raksha Bandhan. So this is the view of uh, calling rivers as sisters. If we are the brothers of the sisters, we ought to protect them, as a brother would protect his sister, and what the Raksha Bandhan thing is all about.
Wow, what a beautiful note you are ending the show on. And yes, I mean, look at the rivers. When we talk about philosophically about life, when we talk about thoughts, don't we compare it to the rivers? So rivers, are a part of our being as such. You wouldn't compare life to anything else. Many a times you read philosophical theories and philosophical thoughts. Most of the philosophers say life is like a river, flow like a river. Your thoughts should be as smooth as a river. Look at the stream, be joyful as a stream. So you can't do without rivers, not even literally, not even physically. So
Absolutely. And
thank
even
you.
in the Mahabharata, when Bhishma, when he was lying on the bed of arrows and Yudhishthir asked him about certain ideas about kingship and about life and death, Bhishma told Yudhishthir that enjoy life like someone standing in the river. Enjoy it, but do not be attached to it. So this is the whole concept of life, and that was also personified as a river in the Mahabharata itself, the Shanti Parva of the Mahabharata.
So thank you so much, Arsh. Thank you for spending time on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to discuss things with you. Hoping to see you in near future once again. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, and I would also like to extend my thankful note to the Getty Foundation. You're doing a wonderful job. This is a need of the hour that we need to have a multiple pedagogic approach to education. That education is not just about questioning the classroom or the students or the teaching apparatus. It is also about questioning the right environment of the classroom, and that ought to be in nature, either along the banks of the rivers or in the midst of the forest. And this is what is all about nurturing the students from within, from the heart.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Global Education and Training Institute is committed to improving qualities of teachers and also to teachers training. So our very own teachers training is starting in April for in-service and pre-service teachers. For more information, you can call on the toll-free number which is mentioned on our website and also on our official page. Thank you once again.